Brian, thanks for being with us today. I want to get to Uber and driverless cars, but first I want you to kind of geek out for us about the history of mapping. Can you give us a sense of both when mapping started, what the major revolutions were, and sort of where we are now? Like 45 seconds or so.
Okay. So it all started back in the There Will Be Dragons days, where people drew maps where they had no idea what was beyond this line because nobody had ever explored it. And the accuracy of those maps was very suspect, but they improved over time through better shipping compasses and drawing. But the struggle that explorers had was they didn't know their longitude. And so some of you may have read this book that's a beautiful description of how accurate timekeeping actually helped sailors know where they were and then therefore make better maps. And so the latitude was easy, you can see where the sun is, but the longitude took a great clock. And that's very important because the next big improvement in mapping came with the GPS. And again, GPS works by transmitting a very precise clock from a satellite and counting the time that it takes to receive you from multiple satellites. And now you know where you are within 5, 10, or 15 meters. And so adding digital mapping happened, then GPS happened, and then now you're able to navigate with your phone. These are all the steps to date. And so at Google, we were able to produce maps that covered the world using some of these technologies. But coming up next is the next big step, which is going to be around self-driving, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and so Uber has grown just at an extraordinary rate over the last few years. Can you give us, tell us about the scale of the operation now and how that plays into Uber's mapping needs?
So Uber is in 400 cities and growing very quickly. We have done well over 1 billion trips, and we are currently have over 1 million drivers active in the Uber service across all cities. We are growing at a multiple per year, which is sort of the fastest growth of any company its size ever. We are already several thousand employees, very focused on the technology of matching the rider and the driver and having a magical experience for getting you and the car safely from point A to point B. And I think that the critical needs for Uber and mapping were because it was central to business. For Google, it was good to have it. For Uber, it's existential. We must have great maps, otherwise we cannot make the right decisions about how to get you there. And
am I correct that you all are doing a mapping initiative in Mexico City? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we are beginning to improve the maps for Uber-specific purposes. So we're collecting imagery for map-making purposes in Mexico City and also in other countries as well. And the goal is to improve the location of pickup and drop-off, which is something that is not well organized in today's maps, and also to find and discover new businesses and new locations that when people are searching for them, we can have them when they look.
So you said pick up and drop off, and we've all had that experience, right, where you're kind of waiting and then, the person's calling, and what is the average time and what is the ideal time? What are you guys trying to compress that to?
Well, so in general, it depends on what city and what time of day it is, but on the order of between 3.5 and 5.5 minutes for major urban areas in the United States and all actually around the world is how long it takes from the time you ask for it till the time the driver shows up. But that varies a lot based on how accurately we have the location, your location, either by name, and also the GPS location of the driver. And so the ability, that accuracy you see play out when the driver calls you. If the driver is not confident about the map or about the destination, they'll call you. And while that's, probably improves the likelihood of pickup, it's not a smooth experience, and it's something that you'd love to skip over and just have the car roll up to your, right in front of you. So our goal is actually to solve that last part and make it a magical experience. And the challenge of that is that GPS alone is not accurate enough. You really need very good visual cues that help both the driver and the rider know where they should go for the fastest pickup.
Yeah, I know when I flew into Midway yesterday, I took an Uber here, I don't mind saying, and it told me to go to like a specific door. Is something like that coming for normal urban streets?
Absolutely. There's a feature we call hotspots, and if you're, I think in San Francisco and a few other cities, you may have already seen it, when you ask for a pickup, will give you recommended spots that you walk to that will end up in a faster pickup experience. And this is, the prime example we have is actually the Uber headquarters is on Market Street. And if you've been in San Francisco, you realize that's a terrible place to drive. The restrictions are incredible. So picking up on Market Street doesn't work. So we recommend people walk around the corner to 11th Street, and drivers can much more easily get in there. And more importantly, after they pick you up, they can actually make a U-turn and then leave and never even see Market Street. And so people who get picked up there end up at their destination faster, and we've now discovered that and highlighted it as a recommended spot. And we do that for most major pickup areas that you'll see. Airports are a very special case, and we work especially hard to optimize those.
Uber just rolled out one of the first fleets of driverless cars, and I understand they did it in Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh is a place of bridges, and as I understand it, autonomous vehicles have a really hard time not sensing a bridge, but knowing where they are on a bridge. Can you tell us about that problem and why Pittsburgh, if that's the case?
Well, the basic answer of why Pittsburgh is that there's an excellent team from Carnegie Mellon and a couple of companies called NREC and Carnegie Robotics that we brought into the company to start that team a while ago, and they have now built the self-driving technology to the point where we're testing it in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is not the easiest place to test self-driving. In some ways that's good. It means that there's a lot of hard challenges early, and bridges are one of these. And so the reason that bridges are hard is actually how mapping is done in the self-driving world. You can't depend on the GPS, and that's true for many reasons, but one is it's just simply not accurate enough. You need to know where you are in the lane, and a lane in Pittsburgh in particular, and on those bridges in particular, is very narrow, and you maybe have 20 centimeters on each side of the mirrors of your car before you're encroaching on the lane or on the edge. So knowing where you are is really important, and it turns out that the way we do that is we create very, very detailed maps of what every segment of the road looks like. And the challenge with bridges is they're repetitive. It's actually hard to tell the difference between this segment and the next segment. And so the goal is you have to get really detailed maps and perhaps have that water faucet or that bird's nest actually get mapped as one of the features to detect, so you can differentiate this segment of bridge from the next one. So getting very precise understanding of where you are is critical for self-driving, and bridges are one of those challenges.
So if you had a map of the physical world, or at least the urban world that was that detailed, what kinds of things could you build on top of that that have nothing to do with driverless cars?
So this goes into an area that I'm very interested in, which is that to get an accurate map of the world down to the level that self-driving needs, you need something, as I said, that can locate the car within 10 centimeters, but actually probably from where the world is even higher resolution than that. But you also need to understand what it is, what the streets labels are, what the signs are, and so forth, and be able to place those exactly. That knowledge can be applied to something else that's coming. Now, many of you maybe saw the original Google Glass came out, and that seemed like an interesting idea that the first version did not go as well as perhaps hoped. But it is coming. Augmented reality is going to come in a situation where labeling the world around you makes it easier for you to get around, makes it easier for you to understand where things are and where you need to go. But to do that, to label the world, you need to understand it. You need to know exactly what it looks like in 3 dimensions. So when I turn my head, I can know that I'm looking at this corner drugstore and that the entrance is over there, and yes, they do in fact carry the medicine I'm looking to go pick up. All of these things are great if you have a really good 3D model of the world, and I think that's a long-term application of this mapping technology.
And so if this experiment goes well and the maps get better, is there a scenario where even within 5-10 years we could see something like 10% of the vehicles on the road being autonomous?
Yeah, in general, I don't get quoted on exactly when and how many, but that's, I think, a safe assumption. I think that self-driving is going to happen in sort of pieces. It's not going to flip a switch and it just works everywhere. And I think that's one of the advantages that Uber has, is that we will be able to carry you with either a self-driving vehicle or a human-driven car, and so you'll always be able to get a ride no matter what the situation.
At some point, will it be impractical to have human drivers, or even illegal to have human drivers on the roads? And will there be kind of little reserves where you could sort of go and, get your drive feels.
So it's interesting. I do think that's true. It's just a matter of when. And I think that the car culture of the 60s and 70s and 80s, those were great cars, and a lot of us grew up loving to drive. And I think there's another set of people growing up right now who just don't care. Children today may not ever get a driver's license. Certainly right now they're already delaying it by 2 or 3 years from what it was true just 10, 20 years ago. So driver's licenses are beginning to fade, and more people are taking Uber and other transport services, and more cities are becoming urban and walkable. And I think that the long-term need to drive a car is going to go down, and it'll just take a while culturally for us to give up our cars, and I think it will take multiple decades.
Yeah. How would a driverless car world sort of transform our cities, in not only existing cities, but presumably there will be new cities, and they'll be built around this technology, and will those look materially different than, say, Chicago or New York?
Yeah, I think they will. Some urban cities have sort of already adapted to this, but they haven't fully adapted. One of the things that happens both with Uber and with self-driving is that cars today are utilized only 4% of the time. The rest of the time they're parked, either in your garage or at the work or at the store or whatever. Right now there's 3 times as many parking spots as there are cars in the United States. And if car utilization were to go up because we started to use Uber and other services, then the number of parking spaces would go down. And this is already happening today, and it's going to happen much more. And I believe that parking real estate recovery is going to be one of the biggest impacts on urban environments ever. I think you'll see, green space, residential areas built up. And the one that I'm kind of excited about is side street parking. It's kind of the worst experience ever. And if we don't need it anymore, you can actually turn these streets that have been narrowed, the sidewalks have been narrowed, and then spread them back out again to what they were before, and recover that real estate and actually make the city more livable again.
It occurs to me that having fleets upon fleets of cars that are kind of moving around the urban environment and recording everywhere they go and shooting out sophisticated sensors in combination with a service where to go anywhere you have to make contact with this network. Are there people who are already trying to game out the surveillance implications of that?
Yeah, I think it's still very early days, and I think there's 2 ways to think about it. For the purposes of mapping, you absolutely do have to go record all of that and figure it out. Much like mapping has been true in the past, where you take single pictures and try and figure it out, and all of the implications that I was familiar with at Google. I think that self-driving is going to be that, but even more so, because you'll record not just the still picture, but it'll probably be video. It'll be a higher frame rate. And it will probably also have LiDAR, these laser sensors that measure distance, but not color and so forth. And that combination will make for those better maps, and it will be absolutely a minimum requirement to do self-driving. Once we have the self-driving vehicles in place, though, they will probably only need to record the things that are different or unusual. And so the 2 cases that are important are when some unusual behavior happens in another driver, when the car itself has to brake hard for some reason and wants to just remember this segment so we can learn from it later. They'll definitely still have to record those. Certainly any accident that ever occurs would need that kind of recording. And the other part would be, has the world changed? As we make maps, we need to keep those maps up to date. And the only way to do that is to compare our recorded map against the new sensor data we have and say, look, it appears that what used to be a 2-lane road is now a 3-lane road, and the stripes have changed, and here's where it is. We'll need to record all of that data so we can remap the changed part of the road very quickly.
It seems like there's 2 kind of simultaneous revolutions going on right now, where you have autonomous taking off, and then you also have an ongoing electric car revolution. When are those 2 going to come together?
As soon as possible. I mean, I think that the challenge with electric is that it's still early days and building at scale. Obviously, Tesla is, I guess, on a run rate of about 80,000, and we now have a new GM vehicle, the Bolt. So that's pretty exciting. But I think it's going to take a while before they're available in quantity. But long term, self-driving and electric is absolutely goes together. I mean, already the cars that you see that are being made self-driving are almost all hybrids, and that's because that electric power powers those wonderful computers that are actually driving the car, and you need that kind of power.
What sort of major infrastructure in cities would you need if you had an entirely kind of autonomous electric world?
The challenge, of course, is recharging. The city already has lots of industrial users who pull a lot of electricity, but they haven't seen the kinds of needs that recharging a large volume of electric cars simultaneously during the day might cause. And so I think some cities' power grid is not yet ready for it, but I think others are, and it'll be something that needs to get fixed over time.
Earlier this year, the big story was that a computer finally beat the sort of human grand champion at the game of Go, which is a really complicated game, much more complicated than chess. When will an autonomous vehicle outdrive a human being?
Wow. It all depends on the definition. I think for one definition is when will a autonomous vehicle be safer than the average human driver, such that you would put them on the road and feel comfortable. When will a autonomous race car driver beat? I don't know, who's the best right now in F1? So that would be the second test. But those are all kind of arbitrary. I think that for certain tasks, it's already true, right? There's certain classes of driving and reaction times that computers are better, but the whole driving experience, it'll be a little while.
As for you and your kind of personal motivation in doing this work, which has been the kind of more inspiring challenge when you were doing Google Earth and the kind of mission there was to map the entire planet in this brand new way, or now when it's kind of ramping up Uber to be this kind of new mode of transportation?
I think they're both interesting challenges. One of my challenges was finding something equivalently hard and interesting after doing Google Maps and Earth, because those were really interesting, hard 10 years. And I think that Uber is one of the few companies that has the opportunity to change the world even more than Google did. Almost said it wrong. And I think that's because transportation is the physical world. Google has kind of organized the digital world reasonably well, but the physical world is much harder, and there's a lot of money and a lot of sort of inefficiency in personal transport right now. And I think that Uber has the opportunity, both with human drivers and with self-driving, to make a big impact there.
When it comes to, if you feel at liberty to say, when it comes to this kind of ongoing race to get to deploying a whole bunch of autonomous vehicles, what are Uber's kind of natural strengths against, say, Tesla, Apple, Google, or the other people who we know that are interested in this?
So I think the biggest strength that Uber has is it knows what it's like to run a service to carry people. And there's a lot of aspects of how you pick somebody up and make them welcome and deliver them to the destination as accurately as possible. And I think that we are doing well at that, and we're going to get a lot better. And I think that that is probably the single biggest differentiator against all of those.
I have this recurring fantasy where by the time I'm able to retire, I will be able to buy a self-driving RV that I can kind of take around the country and have a bottle of wine and say, I'll be in Chicago and tell my friend who's in the Pacific Northwest, meet me at the Grand Canyon or something, and then I can sleep and drink and do whatever else on the way, and it charges itself. How far away are we from something like that? Do I have a hope?
So I think that the right way to ask the question is how you started, which is, when you retire, and I'm confident in 30 to 35 years, because you're a very young man, that'll be completely guaranteed.
All right.
For me, with 13 years left, it'll be an interesting challenge.
Yeah. Are there other, you spend a lot more time imagining the kind of possible futures that we could see from this technology. Are there other kind of fun recreational things that might emerge from this technology in that way?
I think we've seen, going back to the F1 reference, we've seen the E-Series Formula competition for electric cars, and just saw another major company sign up for it this morning, so there'll be 12 teams in a few years. I think there will probably be like an A-Series, autonomous series, where there will be robot drivers competing. It's still early days, and you could argue that the DARPA Grand Challenge was a bit like that, although that speed wasn't their primary concern in the urban one. But I think that you might see something like that occur. A friend of mine, Joshua Schachter, is actually trying to create that series right now.
All right. Well, Brian, thank you for being with us today. This has been great.
Absolutely.